Febreze fabric spray. The phrase, "you should come and take a look at this." That weird orange rotating light attached to a pair of hairdryers thing that I remember first showing up in the Voyager episode Pathfinder and then a bunch of other shows and movies. And the Miranda Class. Yes, lords, ladies, and sovereigns, today we are talking about some of the most overused things in the world, specifically the Miranda Class starship itself. If you've watched a few episodes of Star Trek, the chances are you've seen a Miranda Class ship. It is, of course, one of the most overexposed vessels in the entire fleet. Like, seriously, you look at the Next Generation era and you see these powerful workhorses running around doing various tasks all the time. However, this little ship was incredibly durable. No, not like that one. Being active in both the 23rd century and the 24th century. But what makes the Miranda Class impressive, beyond its irritating ubiquitousness? Why does Starfleet use so many of them? Are they cheap to manufacture and then throw away in battle, or are they just really good at their jobs? Well, let's explore that today, shall we? And dive into our Star Trek Starships Explained series, the Miranda Class. Here we go! Welcome to Trek Central, lords, ladies, and sovereigns. I am your host, Lieutenant Commander Adam, and as always, before we dive into the video, if you want to keep up to date on the latest Star Trek news, lore, and more, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media for daily updates on the Star Trek universe, and as always, please let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, because if you're talking about Star Trek, then we want to hear about it. Is that an overused thing as well? Probably best not to answer that. Coming in at 233 meters, the Miranda Class starship, a medium cruiser, was introduced in the early 2260s. It would suit 220 officers and crew, while having a 500-person evacuation limit. However, by the 24th century, the ship could operate with a minimum crew complement of 26 to 35 personnel due to technological advancements. The ship had a maximum warp speed of 9.2, which it could maintain for 12 hours. The starship would feature your typical primary hull, however, it would lack the secondary hull typically found on the likes of the Constitution class. Further comparisons to the Constitution included a similar saucer section, however, the bridge module, positioned in the top on the center, was shaped differently from that of the Constitution class, and in the absence of a secondary hull, the warp nacelles were attached to the underside of the primary hull. One is located on the port side, the other on the starboard as usual. A docking port was also located on the primary hull, which could be found on the forward section of the starship. 2 shuttle bays were located on the ship's aft section and separated by the Miranda class's impulse engines. Each bay was numbered. Bay 1 was on the left side, the aft port side if you want to be specific about it, and Bay 2 was on the aft starboard right side of the ship. Sometimes you'd also spot the occasional escape pod on board, capable of evacuating personnel. This was seen in use, actually, on board the USS Saratoga during the Battle of Wolf 359. The Miranda class could be told apart from similar classes, such as the Soyuz class or the Farragut-type starship, via the roll bar located on the top of the main hull. Supported by 2 pylons on the port and starboard sides, the roll bar featured a middle pod containing tactical systems, usually. Weapons-wise, the original Miranda class before refits featured 4 photon torpedo launchers, 6 Type 7 phaser arrays, and a further 4 phaser arrays of an unspecified type. The roll bar on the top of the Miranda class, of course, allowed for more significant offensive capability, and the pod contained 2 forward and 2 aft-facing torpedo launchers. Additionally, the bar featured twin phaser emitters located on each shoulder. As proven in the battle with Khan, these additions made the ship more useful in combat situations. By the 24th century, the tactical systems of the Miranda class had indeed been upgraded, which would help with the Dominion War and engagements with the Borg, which, in my humble opinion, could probably have just been won by literally hurling every Miranda class in the galaxy at the cube all at once. Such tactical upgrades included a phaser array mounted on the lower part of the ship's central dome. As well as that, photon torpedo launchers were installed in the main part of the ship's hull, rather than just in the pod on the roll bar. By late 2373, there were at least 5 known different variants for the hull configuration, The Miranda class with the roll bar was considered the default and the traditional layout for starships of the class, but some other configurations would just boot the roll bar altogether. Some configurations even featured 2 large sensor pods on the port and starboard side of the primary hull. The point is, the Miranda was extremely versatile and pretty much modular. Damn near everything on board could be swapped out depending on the mission parameters a particular Miranda class was assigned to, whether it was scientific, or in times of war or border patrol, tactical. The 23rd century design of the Miranda class featured a similar layout to other vessels in this era of the Star Trek universe. A bridge was located in Deck 1, and that was your command and control center of the starship. As per Starfleet standards, the bridge would contain all the typical systems you're used to, such as view screen, navigation, helm, captain's chair aft of the aforementioned stations, the usual suspects. The rear of the bridge featured a single turbolift entrance. However, the rear also featured 2 unique stations for the Miranda class, which were the Master Situation Station on the starboard side, and then the Tactical Station on the port side of the bridge. It appears this bridge design would remain in use for some time, as the USS Saratoga had a similar layout a few years later. However, as with the class, the arrival of the 24th century brought significant upgrades. The layout was changed, as seen aboard the USS Lantry. It was now a simplistic design, featuring a large LCARS interface and star charts at the rear of the bridge. The helm and nav stations were separated, and the helm was replaced by the con and op station. Given the ship class was constructed around the same time as the refit Constitution being introduced, the interior layout, such as the ship's corridors, was much the same. Yet later starships, such as the USS Saratoga, Sisko's vessel, would feature more heavily fortified interior designs. Main engineering was again very similar to the Constitution class, with a single vertical warp core and levels surrounding it. Other interior locations were also standard designs for the time, such as the transporter room, which contains 6 transport pads. However, these transport controls could be commanded from the bridge of the Miranda class. Useful for scientific missions, I'd say, or if you're really trying to get away from things in a hurry. The outer rim of the primary hull and saucer section was where the crew quarters were located. These quarters were standard Starfleet design, however, given their placement in the ship, they featured numerous large support braces to reinforce them. Due to the location, large picture windows allowed the crew to have better visibility outside of the ship. Introduced in the 2260s, one of the first Miranda-class starships would also become one of the most famous. The USS Reliant was launched in 2264 and was one of the first Miranda-class starships Starfleet put into service. By 2285, it was attached to the secret Project Genesis, a project so highly classified that we even had to leave it out of the superweapons video. And during this attachment to Project Genesis, it was at the disposal of Drs. Carol and David Marcus. The science team worked from the Regular One space station, while Reliant would be out on the frontier, searching for lifeless planets to be used for the secret project itself. However, the Reliant would, of course, encounter something far worse. Under the command of Captain Clark Terrell and his first officer, Pavel Chekhov, the ship approached the planet Ceti Alpha 6, which was actually Ceti Alpha 5 with a fake ID. Upon beaming to investigate, the crew found Khan Noonien Singh, a superhuman augment exiled to the planet after his previous run-in with Starfleet aboard the USS Enterprise under Captain Kirk, which until they encountered Khan was busy Star Trekking across the universe. Khan captured the crew and eventually used mind-controlling Ceti eels to hijack the Reliant and maroon her crew on the planet's surface. Khan learned about Project Genesis and proceeded to move to Regular One, stealing the device's secrets and torturing the scientists. The Reliant was then used to intercept Admiral James T. Kirk aboard the USS Enterprise. Khan, of course, blamed Kirk for his exile, and also for the loss of so many of his followers. Khan and his remaining followers used Reliant's weapons to deal crippling blows to the Enterprise. Eventually, Kirk, his reading glasses, and I suppose the Enterprise crew, turned the tables, albeit briefly, and caused severe damage to Reliant by using the computer's prefix code to shut off its shields. The final engagement between the two ships took place in the Mutara Nebula. While Khan had the upper hand against the damaged Enterprise, he ultimately lost the battle. The Enterprise outmaneuvered the Reliant and disabled it with phasers and photon torpedoes, destroying much of its port nacelle and its weapon pylon. Khan, however, would not go quietly because of course he wouldn't. The augment armed the Genesis device and detonated it, which, even though it created a shiny new planet from literally nothing, ultimately destroyed the Reliant itself. But as it turns out, the sudden appearance of an entire planet on top of it was not enough to finish off the Miranda class itself. Several others were active in the mid-2280s. The class would also still be in use by the 24th century, with Starfleet constructing many new vessels of the class. As the 24th century Starfleet encountered more formidable adversaries such as the Borg, the Miranda class was present in several major Federation engagements with them. A notable ship of the class at the time was the USS Saratoga, NCC 31911. This was where Lieutenant Commander Benjamin Sisko was stationed at the time of the Battle of Wolf 359. After sustaining a crippling blow, the ship was evacuated before it was destroyed via a Borg cutting beam in combination with a warp core breach. The uncontrolled explosion, not the drink. With the Dominion War outbreak, Starfleet relied on the Miranda class's escorts and light frigates. These ships saw action in many famous battles, such as Operation Return, the first and second battles of Chintoka, and the Battle of Cardassia. One such notable ship during these was the USS Majestic, which took part in Operation Return under the command of Captain Benjamin Sisko and the USS Defiant. Unfortunately, though, that ship was destroyed in the battle after trying to break through enemy lines. A Jem'Hadar battlecruiser delivered the finishing blow with a torpedo, which severed its starboard nacelle. While the Dominion War cost Starfleet many ships, the Miranda class was still in use by the end of the 2370s. In the early 2380s, the USS Macduff, a Miranda-class ship, was featured in a holodeck program by Ensign Beckett Mariner. Therefore, this suggests that Starfleet still used the versatile Miranda class by this time. The ship appears to have been one of the longest-serving Starfleet ships, having been in place for at least 111 years. By the early 25th century, the Miranda class had been succeeded by the newly introduced Reliant-class line of ships, named after the notable USS Reliant that Khan had hijacked. Bearing similarities to their predecessor class, the Reliant class was present heavily alongside the Sagan-class USS Stargazer and a fleet of numerous other Starship classes in dealing with the arrival of a new Borg Queen and Collective. Such Reliant-class ships included the namesake of the class, the new USS Reliant, the USS Clark, and the USS Uhura, named after the legendary Starfleet officer Nyota Uhura. Shifting behind the scenes now, though, did you know that the designers of the Miranda class, which was introduced with the USS Reliant, relished the opportunity to make the first new Starfleet ship to be seen on screen since the USS Enterprise? Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan marked the first time a Starfleet starship had been seen on screen that was not a redressed Enterprise model. The Reliant was designed, therefore the Miranda class was born on screen. However, the name of the class was not mentioned in the dialogue on screen in Star Trek, and the bridge still used a redressed Enterprise bridge. The show's art department coined the name to refer to the ship design until Star Trek The Next Generation. While Star Trek The Voyage Home would refer to the Miranda class as a Reliant class, signage on TNG made mention of the Miranda class, and dedicated reference materials, such as the Star Trek Encyclopedia, did so as well. Production designer Joe Jennings and art director Mike Miner were the two main people behind the ship. However, there were contributions by Lee Cole as well. The goal was to make the ship look different from the Enterprise. However, they needed to be recognized as a Starfleet starship. The creatives faced the challenge of making the Miranda look different, but also the same. Yeah, I can see why that would get confusing. But at least they managed to make it look like it was from the same design era as the Enterprise. Originally, the Miranda class was designed in a different configuration than what we ultimately saw. The idea was to have the warp nacelles above the deflector dish, and then two counterbalancing torpedo pods on the bottom. However, when the designers sent off the finished concept for approval to Harve Bennett, he viewed the designs upside down and approved those. The producers debated sending it back the right way round, but decided to add the roll bar instead, to balance out the dropped nacelles. Perhaps the most challenging part of the design was the physical filming model. It took months to build. As the Wrath of Khan was filmed many decades ago, a physical studio model was built for filming. Industrial Light and Magic, the visual effects team on Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, did this. Under the supervision of model maker Steve Gawley, it took an entire team around 4 months to construct the ship's model. While the model for the USS Enterprise was somewhat difficult to film with, ILM did not want the same mistake made for the Reliant. The studio model would be used numerous times to stand in as the Miranda Class, notably used for the USS Lantry in Star Trek The Next Generation. However, to make the ship appear different, the roll bar was removed. Yet this wasn't planned. The model had just been used in Star Trek IV as the first USS Saratoga. However, the effects crew could not get the internal lighting on the roll bar to work on time, so they just removed it. Hence, the USS Lantry did not have the bar installed, making it appear different. Once again, the model would be used for the USS Britannia in The Next Generation, with only minor modifications this time around. The visual effects team had fixed the roll bar, therefore Britannia appears as the standard configuration for the Miranda class. Interestingly enough, the model of the USS Britannia actually says the USS Britannia on it, a misspelling as the ship is meant to honor Walter Hauser Britannia, a famous American physicist. A challenge came when the producers of Star Trek The Next Generation had to create modifications to the Miranda class model for the USS Bozeman. Featured as the Soyuz class in TNG's 5th season episode Cause and Effect, they wanted to make the ship look different again. This is the famous episode where the Bozeman collided with the USS Enterprise D, causing a warp core breach. While being one of the oldest Starfleet starships, the legacy of the Miranda class still lives on to this day, having recently been featured in Star Trek Lower Decks as the USS Macduff. However, several bits of Star Trek media embraced and used the design before that. A notable mention is the MMO Star Trek Online. In that video game, the player will take command of a Miranda class and venture off. They'll later claim the ship was their first playable starship. The Miranda class in Star Trek Online is highly versatile due to the number of different ship parts it can use, so you can really make some more unique variants than simply removing its roll bar. 2020's Ships of the Line Star Trek calendar featured the USS Bombay, fighting Tholian ships for the month of June. This was a reference to the event mentioned in Star Trek Vanguard novel Harbinger. With Star Trek Strange New Worlds currently on screen and taking place close to the early 2260s, there is a slim chance we might see the early prototypes of the Miranda class again in live action. Perhaps even the USS Miranda herself. Or could a predecessor of the Miranda class be the recently seen USS Farragut? Who knows? What do you think of Starfleet's most overused starship? I mean, it always makes sense why they use it, after all. But let us know your thoughts in the comments, as always. And if you want to keep up to date on all the latest Star Trek news, lore, and more, then make sure you hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media or join our community Discord server. But for now, I've been Lieutenant Commander Adam. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Live long and prosper, my friends.